Now, you see where I stand on this. Let's talk to some others now. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Blumenauer of Oregon. He sits on the House Budget Committee. Congressman, look, I want to talk about the Republicans in a second, but I got to start with President Obama. Do you think it's a great idea to do these budget cuts here and start giving in to Republicans who don't give you anything back?
Well, I personally think that some of the reductions that the president has proposed are not priorities that I would push. I do give him credit for focusing on the need to keep going with health care reform, which is the largest source of our budget deficit in the future, and retaining the commitment to rebuild and renew America, putting Americans to work, revitalizing our communities. But you were right at the top. If we are going to not deal with health care reform, and if we're not going to deal with the fact that these tax cuts actually significantly increased the deficit, we're going to be chasing our tails. We should be reforming the tax system, not extending the tax cuts.
Congressman Blumenauer, is there any effort by the Democrats, whether it's in the House, the Senate, I know there isn't in the White House, but to say, hey, you know what? We'll talk about cuts, and that's a fair discussion. Sometimes you need cuts to balance the budget. Of course, everybody gets that. That's reasonable, right? But you have to talk about tax cuts for the rich. If you don't give back some of the money that they just took, well, we're not going to talk about cuts. So quid pro quo. You either put up or you shut up. Is there a movement like that among the Democrats or none whatsoever?
Well, there were a number of us, as you know, that voted against the extension of the tax cuts at the end of the last Congress. It's going to be on the table very quickly. The Republicans are going to be continuing to push ahead with this, along with their crazy ideas about conditioning increasing the debt limit with draconian elements. We're going to be in the middle of this over the course of the next 2 years. I agree with you. We need to have tax reform. The last thing we need to do is to extend tax cuts for people who need them the least. But we also need to continue with the rebuilding and renewing America and accelerating health care reform, not trying to eliminate it.
Congressman Blumenauer, let me get more specific. You know, there's to President Obama's credit and to the Democrats' credit, they want to take away oil subsidies, or some of them do. Some of the Democrats don't, but a lot of them do. They want to take away the subsidies that goes $36 billion over the next 10 years. That's a giant number, right? So how about, again, we've been, throughout the segment, we've been talking about the 2-year time period. So that'd be a little over $7 billion that they would save. Now, the Republicans say, no, I need to give it to the oil companies because I'm going to cut from the poor, I'm going to cut from the middle class, but I got to give it to my oil company friends. Can't the Democrats at least take a stand and go, oh, that's it? We're not going to give you a dime of cuts until you cut those oil subsidies for the richest companies in the world.
Well, as you may know, last week I introduced legislation that would do just that. In fact, it would cut over $40 billion over the next 5 years. Many of those are embedded in the president's budget. I think we ought to stand up and fight for them. We ought to spotlight the fact that the Republicans won't allow tax break loophole closing to count towards deficit reduction, but just because those are their rather silly rules doesn't mean we shouldn't push ahead and try and do it.
Congressman Blumenauer, I agree with your bill, but you guys got to draw the line. If you don't draw the line and say we are not doing a single cut until you agree to that, you're going to get rolled over. I mean, I don't know if the White House understands that. I don't know if the Democrats in Congress understand that. I mean, my guess is I have to be honest with you. I think that you guys aren't going to insist on it. And when you don't, you're not going to win.
Well, we're involved with sort of an elaborate four-way discussion here. We've got the Republicans in the House who are proposing draconian, ideologically driven massive cuts. We have a proposal from the president. We're going to be pushing back on the House Budget Committee for Democrats, and we're going to have to be working with the Senate. I'm convinced that if we are aggressive in terms of tax justice, in terms of being sensible in the reductions in areas like the military, like areas of agricultural reform, and accelerating health care reform, I think there's a path that the American public will agree with.
All right, Congressman Blumenauer, thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it.